Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Quantum Mystic Podcast, where we love to explore that super cool intersection of consciousness. Today, we're about consciousness relationships and coming home to your authentic self. I'm Lisa Campion, and this is my lovely and very wise friend and co host, Jane Bear. And we welcome you so much. Today, we're going to deep dive into something I think that touches every single one of us. It's kind of subtle, it's really normalized, so that sometimes we don't see that it's happening. But how often do we lose ourselves and abandon ourselves in our relationships? Have you ever said yes when you meant to say no? How many times have you swallowed your truth to keep someone else comfortable? And how many times have you disconnected from your own inner beingness in order to maintain a relationship? Ouch, right? If you're listening and you're feeling a little uncomfortable with that, it's really great. That means we're on the right track. So that discomfort is sort of a recognition that we've got something to talk about here. And that's what we're going to do, how to stop abandoning yourself in a relationship and everywhere else too. And just so you don't think this is about totally about romantic relationships, let's be clear. We self-abandonment shows up everywhere in our families, our friendships, our work, our spiritual community, anywhere we really prioritize being liked, accepted over being our true self. Where anytime we choose that our ego self chooses that safety over our own sovereignty. And I really feel like I know for me, this is sort of where the rubber meets the road in our spiritual practice. And we have to take everything we're learning and really apply it in a very painful way, often very painful ways. This is not easy, but it can be super growthful. So thank you so much for being here. If you're listening in, we'd love to hear you where you're from, say hello, give us some love in the comment section. And yeah, what do you think, Jane? What do you think about this topic?
Yeah, well, I want to add, this podcast is so fun and maybe a little different than others that people listen to because we record these live. And so that's why it's fun to have, if you are listening live to jump in and ask questions and just let us know, your thoughts on what we're talking about. So I just want to add that. And I agree with everything you just said. It was great opening because, self-abandonment can be so sneaky, especially because we've most likely been doing it our entire lives. And so we
Yeah.
don't actually know the difference. We don't even know that we're, um, bypassing our own needs for other people's needs. And we might not even be aware that we're not listening to our own intuition, um, and or that we're in constant survival mode because we've been, again, I feel like I've said this a gajillion times, but we humans are designed and created so brilliantly that this has all been, it's all survival. We've been living in survival mode, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's kept us safe. It's kept us, this like self-abandonment has like kept us going. But like you said, this is really where the rubber meets the road on the spiritual path, which is what we're all about in expanding and raising our own consciousness, is to sort of interrupt those patterns, so that we can see when we're doing these things, and we don't need to live in survival mode anymore. We can notice how this stuff can be draining our own energy. So yeah, I feel like self-abandonment really does look like skipping over your own needs just to keep the peace. How many times have we done that? Or
Yeah.
like dismissing our own, that own gut feeling, that own intuition, just to avoid conflict. I feel like we've
Yep.
all done that too. Um,
Totally.
and and again, it can really be like we're in this constant survival mode, even if we're not in danger anymore. if even if we like literally look around and there's no danger, we're good. But we're programmed to live in survival mode. So all these little things, they really do add up, and they will like take away your own authenticness, your own authenticity. And ultimately it can be at the cost of our own self-respect. I feel like, we might not love, like, it might be hard to love ourselves because we're doing this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of shame about it. I'm gonna say hi to Terry. Hi, Terry Hall. And Jody Bees,
Hi,
our
Judy.
beloved Jody. Jody, thanks for being here. She says she loves this topic and it's one of the deepest wounds that I'm continually healing. Me too, Jody. And let's say hi to Lisa and Jessica. It's nice to see you guys. I
Hold on.
know I was feeling like as a recovering people pleaser, like, and conflict avoidant people empath and people pleaser. I think it's so ingrained in me. And also like, this comes into our child. You touched on this, Jane, but I really feel like it comes from our childhood, like these are survival patterns that we form in our, very, very early childhood before we're conscious of the pattern. Maybe we're carrying them in from past lives. Maybe they're part of our family of origin. Like we may be replicating patterns our own parents had. So for most of us, this isn't something we think about. We don't sit down and think about how can I abandon myself in my relationship today. It's not like that. It's running from our subconscious,
Yeah.
and there are patterns that we had to do, or like you said, the brilliance of the pattern. Like, aren't we clever for having figured out such a brilliant survival strategy? But as adults who are raising our consciousness, those patterns don't work anymore, and the cost of them is too high.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so it's, we do this, we abandon ourselves in so many different ways. Again, little things like you already said, like saying yes when we actually mean no, because it's how we got love and how we got approval and how we felt safe. And so really it's, when we adapt to be like the quiet one because we got more love for being the quiet one, or we receive more love for being the caretaker, or we like silenced our own anger or our own grief or rage so that we don't upset anyone. And it really did work when we were kids, but as adults, it keeps us very stuck.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a really sticky one, Jane. Like, this is a sort of a really triggery one, but how many times have we collectively as humans like had sex when we didn't want to have sex?
Such a common, for women especially. I'm not like saying not for men, but it's because it's very true. But I think women, even in a loving marriage or relationship, we can say yes when we actually mean no
I know.
all the time.
Yeah, and that's a really painful self-abandonment.
Yeah.
It's so damaging when we do that. We can do it without thinking about it. We can do it. We just sort of maybe feel gross and shamey afterwards, you
Mhm.
know, like, oh, um, you know,
Yeah, or
I
just
don't know.
like numb, right? You might feel like your body might go numb. Your body might
Mm,
kind of, or you just kind of leave the building and disembody,
yeah.
not even realize that you're doing it.
Yeah, I brought that one up because that one was like where I really noticed my own pattern, like the
Mm,
first time, you
yeah.
know? And it was super hard to unwind because it's such a sticky topic.
Mhm.
But I just it was so obvious. It took me a long time to kind of notice that I was doing that. Oh, I'm gonna do that. Oh, I have that pattern of doing it. I'm gonna do it again. Oh, oops, I did it again, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And maybe next time I won't have to do that. And like how long did it take to unwind that?
Yeah.
Um, and then there was sort of this commitment that I have about like I'm never gonna do that again. And
Mm,
I don't care like that's like there's a bottom line. I
mm,
think we can kind of get to those bottom line moments, like no matter what,
yeah.
I'm not going to, do that. And in the world of archetypes, this is the prostitute archetype.
Mhm.
And the prostitute archetype, it doesn't mean about selling yourself for sex. It means about where do you sell yourself out?
Mm,
Where do you sell yourself out for your survival needs, you know?
Mm,
And maybe that's like sticking in a relationship that doesn't isn't great for you because you it's your survival, you know, your house, your money. You know, maybe it's a corporate prostitution. Like you're
mm,
in some corporate job that you can't leave because of survival, you know? And the shadow side of that archetype is all about selling yourself out. When we work with archetypes, we always work with the shadow and the light. And we always talk about the shadow and the light on this podcast too, and in our mystery school. So the light side of that, the prostitute archetype is, never selling yourself out, knowing what your price is, knowing what your worth
mm,
is, and never taking a penny less of
mm.
what you're truly worth. So there's something really like powerful about owning that. Carolyn Mace talks about that as one of the four, she calls them survival archetypes, that every human has. So but all of us have some way where we do that.
Absolutely. Oh, it's so good. That's so juicy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that really gets down to it. And it's just like you said, it's about recognizing what that thing is, what that like oof is.
Hmm.
When you really get to like the deeper spiritual work. And I want to say on that topic, in adulthood, we can often, especially if we're on the spiritual path, we can disguise the self-abandonment with spiritual growth. And um, I
So sneaky.
so sneaky. And I think that it's a really important, because if you're listening to this, then you're on the spiritual path. So if you notice yourself saying things like, I'm just being compassionate, or I'm holding space, or I'm in the process of letting go of my ego. It's like, we need to be sure that that's actually what we're doing, because if being compassionate is actually betraying yourself, or like the other example, if you're holding space really means like you're silencing yourself and what you're truly feeling, um, and or like ego work, are you ignoring your own humanity or other people's humanities? Like you're not actually doing the work and you're not growing. You're continuing the abandonment cycle.
Yeah. I know that, and that's where I think it gets so sneaky because we can sort of fluff over the hard part of like looking at that. Like, who wants to look at that? Like, like, where am I selling myself out? And because it's about survival, the stakes are high. Like, it feels like, well, there's nothing I can do. I can't give up my job or I can't give up my relationship. And, and it doesn't mean you have to. I mean, sometimes it's not a black and white answer. In fact, sometimes I think we're in those situations as a way to like do repetitions, to do boundary setting reps, or to do, like yes and no saying reps. Oh, and sort of, I hate to say low stakes because they're not always low stake environments, but like an environment where, you know, it's not the end of the world if you're like figuring out how to say no or figuring out how to advocate for yourself or even figuring out what your needs and wants are. Because we
Right.
might sometimes we're so outer focused, we're like, I don't even know what I want or need. I don't even
Mm,
know where my boundary is. I don't even know, like I can't even feel that. So
mm,
we find ourselves in these patterns, and oftentimes they replicate the patterns that we came from our childhood, right? So it might be you're in your marriage, or it might be in your work, but there's like a pattern replication that happens that gives us an opportunity. We, as children, we didn't have a chance to do it. We just get imprinted with the pattern, Then as
mhm,
adults, we create, attract, I don't know, the same pattern. And so we have the chance to be like, I'm going to say no this time. I'm going to say no this time. I said no,
mhm.
like to do the reps. So it's not like one and done. It's not black and white. Like somehow you wave a wand and you're magically released from the shackles of this dynamic. It's more like, I think, little
Mhm.
increments, little opportunities to practice that.
Yeah, I agree. And that, the pattern, I don't, whether it's the universe or it's just how it works, all the universal laws of these things will keep coming back until we've
Mm.
essentially learned the lesson. And that's sort of like the Groundhog Day metaphor, is when you
Yeah.
when you just get it right, it stops, and it's like, oh, I'm done. I'm done with that lesson. Finally figured it out.
Yeah.
but it can be like over and over and over and over and over again. And that's okay because we're all doing it. We're literally all doing it. So we're
Yeah.
on the same boat, you know?
Mhm.
But yeah, I feel like you know, this the conditioning, there's lots of different ways to stop the conditioning, and like you said, it's about little bits of define of discipline. Um, and it's just kind of choosing yourself consistently even when it's uncomfortable. Um, and I I feel like I'm always going to go back to the embodiment practices, and so listening to your body, um, before getting to the place where you can listen to your body, over the conditioning, and knowing the difference, because conditioning I feel like is going to feel uncomfortable and maybe like like yucky.
Yeah.
And the yes or no is going to be very clear and like and concise, and that yes or no is going to come from a different place for everybody. I think depending on your design, it's learning how to listen to your yes and no, which is really really important, which is going back to what you were saying, is those sort of low stakes scenarios of, should I take a left here or take a right, and listening to that so you can get to know what your yes and no are. um,
Yeah. I have to be alone in a room by myself, like, oftentimes with my calendar. I have to meditate on it. It's really hard for me to get to that yes or no if I'm with another person, 'cause I'm
mm,
feeling that other person so much. I'm
mm,
like, "Oh, their need, their want, their thing," and I'm
mm,
like, "Oh, but I love them and I wanna help them." So, yes, and that's just my default, I just think I'm wired that way, and so I have to kinda be like, "I'll get back to you tomorrow." And then like, really never saying yes, and I never make that decision in the moment because 'cause I'm always gonna say yes, and then that's bad for me. So,
mm,
"I'll get back to you tomorrow," and then I have to get a week, like, even if it's somebody I love, I have to, like, literally, like, disconnect from their energy and go sit in a room by myself before I can feel the answer to that, and
mm,
I think that there's some, like, reframing we can do around the no saying as kind of sacred self-love, like, um, as a defiant act of self-love,
mm,
and with the sacred quality, it's kind of there's that sort of trite saying, which is saying, saying no to somebody else is saying yes to yourself, but I think it's totally true.
mhm,
And and I know for me, like, I had to just come up with a lot of, like, really nice ways to say no,
mhm,
and then literally practice them in the mirror until I could look myself in the eye and say it with a smile on my face,
mhm,
you know? In order to, like, because the no, I mean, I just grew up in a family where no was not an option, and, you know, and it even saying no felt like it jacked my nervous system,
mm,
you know, into fight or flight, and it took me a long time to trust and believe that the world's not gonna end, people aren't gonna hate me, like, it's I'm not gonna die, like, it's like, if I say no, it's like somehow people will adapt and the world goes on, and actually from a conscious relationship perspective, you're much more trustworthy if people can trust that you're gonna say no.
absolutely, exactly. And you and I have had this conversation before. Like I am very much not a people pleaser. Although, I would like people to like me, but I'm not a people pleaser. I'm okay saying no. And I absolutely, knowing what my answer is, I do need to sleep on it. I need
Mhm.
to really truly know what it is that I want in this moment. You know, I can weigh the options, like, yeah, oh, that would be good. This would be good. Well, if I did this, then, and so I sleep on it. And then in the morning it's very clear.
Mm.
And then it's the follow through, you know? It really
Yeah.
is the follow through, and like you said, I mean, this goes back to very simple 4 agreements. It's like our what we say is ultimately not really gonna affect people as deeply as we think it is, you know? It's
Right.
we like and like you said, and also like you said, like people will trust us more if we're sticking to what is true for us because I think people are more sensitive to other people's energies than we realize. And
Yeah.
so, if we're saying no, but we mean yes,
It
they're gonna
feels crappy. It feels crappy when somebody does that to you. It doesn't feel good. We think we're doing someone a favor, but really it's icky. Like there's an ick factor there. Like, oh my
yeah.
God, they said yes. But I really think they don't mean that. Yes, they feel no. Now now I feel weird. Now I have a weird. Now you have a weird in your relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. And then that needs to
Yeah.
be cleaned up. So,
Yeah.
it's okay to let people be uncomfortable without making it your responsibility because that's their own stuff. If
Right.
you're being honest with yourself makes other people uncomfortable, it's not your job. It's not your
I
job
mean,
to
that's sort of the cure for codependency, right? Is where we learn how to handle other people's reaction. We don't to our no. We don't have to jump in and save them from our no. We let them deal with their reaction over there, and
yeah.
we kind of that's their sovereignty. That's their, we trust that they're going to figure out how to deal with that.
Mhm.
Even though people don't always like it when you say no, and sometimes they
Right.
have a hissy fit, especially if they're not used to hearing no from you. But that's I think for me what broke the codependency pattern is like, I'm gonna trust that you handle it was my kid dealing with my kids, especially raising kids and even having adult children is where that was like you get to say no 800 billion times,
Mhm.
you know? I
Mhm.
want to hear from people some comments. Like, what do you guys think about this topic? Drop a comment in there and let us know how this goes for you. Love to
Yeah,
hear.
how this lands, and just to follow up with what you're saying, because at the end of the day, the reason why we do this work is we're in the longest relationship of our lives with ourselves, and if we leave ourselves, if we're constantly abandoning ourselves, no one else can make up for it. Like it's us. This is us doing the inside job. So it's this is such important work. Otherwise, we're continually handing our power to everybody else around us and saying, you're
Mhm.
responsible for my well-being. Um,
Yeah.
I call bullshit on that.
Yes, indeed. That's just not how it works. No, no one's responsible. No one can be responsible for anybody else. We think we can. We claim responsibility there, but that's not how universal law works. It's not how it's just not. It's some like ego illusion that we create, that we live under.
Yeah,
And there is that. I love that like people are going to do what they're going to do. I love parts of Mel Robbins' the let them theory. I think that's this is a really great place to apply the let them.
mm,
Let them have a reaction. Let them, have their feelings about
yeah.
you, let them do that.
Let your
And
parents have a hissy fit.
yeah,
It's fine.
exactly. It's fine. They're gonna survive. Everyone's gonna survive.
It's gonna be
And
fine.
and that, they're allowed to have their feelings. They're not allowed to take their feelings out on you, but they're allowed to have their feelings. And that, coming back to like, what you said was so powerful, Jane. I just almost wanna repeat it. Like, the only one who's never gonna abandon you is you. I
Yeah,
would say it's like you and God, kind of,
yeah,
you know?
absolutely.
And, and if other people do, it's because they have to do what's right for them, you
Right.
know? And even if you're married for 40 years, even if, you've had 5,000,000 lifetimes with that person, I don't know. Like, it's still that ultimately that's what it comes down to. And when we come from that place, there's like a freedom or um there's a liberation that I feel like when we stop expecting that. It's beautiful when we get it from other people.
Mhm.
We get validation or we get like, you know, connection, love when we're on the same page is beautiful, but if we count on it, it's painful.
Yeah,
Right?
it's a setup. I mean, we're just setting ourselves up for continued, um, maybe not failure, but just like
Suffering.
suffering. Yeah, because then we're at the mercy of other people's um, feelings. I mean, you're asking for validation from somebody else, and they might be having a bad day, and that's good. Like, you know what I mean? It's just like it's a path of sort of self-destruction if we're handing over um, that relationship to somebody else when it really is
Yeah.
about our relationship with ourselves, and that ripples out into the relationship with anyone around you.
Right. Totally. Genesis. Hi, Genesis. Genesis says this resonates so much. Exactly my life lessons right now. Me too. And Lisa says choosing between yourself and your adult children and setting healthy boundaries has been the most difficult in the last 3 months. I hear you, sister. It's, my children are adults and same. It's a tricky one. So I feel that from both of you so much.
And I want to touch on, for those who are like in the middle, kind of like your Lisa saying about, this difficulty that she's in with her adult children. Like when you're in the middle of a messy dynamic, the the practical tools of what we can do, because that's I was bring it back to. You might not be able to wait until the dust settles and you can reflect on it, but you really need to know how to do this work real time. And I'll just start by saying, like, always taking a breath. So using your breath as sort of the pattern interrupter to pause and check in with your body, and then notice, like, am I tightening? Am I holding my breath? Am I shutting down? Well, like, really notice, start mapping your own body and what you do when things get harder. You're in that moment of abandoning
Mm.
yourself. And then once you can do that, you can start naming what's actually true for you, even if it is messy. Like, okay, in this moment, I need a break, or I'm not okay with this. And then you really need to choose clarity over whatever whatever you've been doing in the past. So even if your voice is shaky, or speaking your truth, is or speaking truth, the truth is hard. It really realigns you with yourself. So that's the action. Is, if you need a break, it's the saying, I need a break, and we'll come back to this.
Yeah, I love that. I have my practical tool is about negotiation.
Mm,
And, mine is like, I can't do this, but what about this? I can't do
mm,
A, but what about B? You know, this is what I can do. And I find that that's what works for me the best. Because there's a clear, I'm not going to do A, but this is what I can do. And people will be like, oh, that's fine. Yeah, that's great. Why not? Yeah, that's perfect. But B is even better, you know? And that kind of, for me, takes my nervous system out of I'm going to die kind of,
mhm.
black and white, like it's all or nothing. Like if I can like get the black and white out of it and be like, well, can we negotiate? And if B doesn't work, what else can you put on the table that might work for both of us? So that's my practical strategy, but I definitely don't think it would work until I did your strategy, Jane, to take a breath, to like, to take a
Yeah,
minute, to take like disconnect from kind of get out of that, like, to regulate your nervous system, regulate your emotions, and then negotiate.
I love the negotiation. That's so good, because I think a lot of times the reaction, if we've been putting ourselves last most of our lives, when we come to a place in our adulthood where somebody's, um, you know, it feels like somebody's forcing us to do something, but we're really just agreeing to it. We're going to start becoming, a bit aggro. We're going to start feeling resentment um, towards that person, even though we're the ones who are actually doing the abandoning, right? And we're the
Right.
ones who are saying yes when we mean no. And so these practical tools are about learning to come back to yourself without blowing things up.
Right.
And I think that that's often what we see in the world, is people going around with these woundings, because they're mad at themselves for doing this for so long, but don't know how to do things differently. And so they're just like burning down the house instead of, like you said, coming to a place where, okay, well, deep breath, let's negotiate because this isn't actually what I want. And so
Right.
you're re-entering your body, you're coming back to your voice so that you can actually speak, and be present in
Mm,
the middle of whatever dynamic is unfolding.
yeah. And I think for me, like a lot of the fear around this is just stories I make up in my own head.
Yeah.
So, I have a story that if I say no to A, the world's gonna end, and if
Mhm.
I say and what I actually do if I say, "Well, no to A, but what about B?" The other person's like, they literally don't care. They don't the whole story I made up about how they're gonna hate me and the world's gonna end, it's gonna be the end of the relationship and blah, 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 like the house on fire, you know? And that it's not even real. It's just, like, my own whatever, neurosis that comes from my trauma,
These crazy
and from
stories,
my
but
past trauma. It's like some stories I made up, and I'm like and they're like, "Yeah, that's great." And I'm like, "Oh my god, I was so afraid to have that conversation." And then they were like, "Yeah, B is even better.
yeah,
Perfect. Love it. Love it." You know? So I
yeah.
just think we can, like, unhook if we unhook sort of the pressure, it's like a pressure cooker. And if we unhook some of that pressure by breathing and grounding and being embodied and regulating our nervous system and kinda coming back into reality, like, well, what's actually real here?
Mhm.
What's and then offering that other possibilities just diffuses the whole it's like diffuses the bomb that's ticking in my own head, you know?
Mhm. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I feel like, again, moving forward for those who are with us, if you notice you leave a conversation or make a decision and you feel smaller or you feel invisible or more disconnected from yourself, that's sort of the litmus test that, that wasn't a compromise. Actually, that was self-abandonment. So learning how to tell the difference,
Yeah.
um, of a healthy compromise, where you're actually meeting in the middle while staying rooted in yourself, um, is sort of that, like, I can bend without breaking, and that's the North Star. That's where we're heading.
And if you dig this conversation, you definitely wanna find out more about how Jane and I work and you want more of this, we have a mystery school. And the Quantum Mystic Mystery School you can find at quantum-mystic.com. We, enroll a new group in June, and this is what we do. This is you got a taste of what we're all about there. So if you feel like you want some more of that in your life, and you can just check out the podcasts that we have. We have a channel on YouTube that has all these, and also you can find us anywhere podcasts live. We hope you check out some of our our other mind-bending conversations that we have with each other and with you all. So thank you so much for all of that.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Lisa. Thank you. It's always so much fun.
So much fun.